Hi guys, and welcome to a new video on Sonal's life. January 4th, 2018, a young Sonal decided to go onto the internet, saw that some event called Wrestle Kingdom was on, and decided to have a watch. Fast forward to 2021, and Sonal is now creating content on New Japan. I don't know why, but for some reason, and it might have been because it has been the 3-year anniversary since I first went to a New Japan event and got to meet Switchblade Jay White, and I'll put the picture here. But I've suddenly started feeling really nostalgic about how I fell in love with New Japan and why I love New Japan so much. So I decided to look at 5 things that I have learned from New Japan. When I started watching it, it was a completely new world for me. I'd lived watching WWE, I had a few British independent scenes, but this was unlike anything I ever saw. And throughout the years, it's taught me so many things about wrestling, about Japan, about what the sport can be about and what it really is at the heart. So yeah, here are my top 5 things that I have learned since watching New Japan in 2018. Let's get going. So, number 1, it is time limits do matter. So when I was watching WWE, I don't think I'd ever heard them say this match has got a certain time limit. They would just go on for pretty much however long the match needed to go on for. And with WWE, sometimes they went on for a lot longer than they should have. The first thing that caught me about New Japan was these very specific time limits. So normally you'll have Young Lion opening matches, they will be 10 minutes. Then you'll have the opening tag matches, which will normally range between 15 to 20 minutes, I think with normally a 20-minute cutoff. You have tournaments, so like the G1 New Japan Cup Best of Super Junior and all the tag leagues will have a half an hour. And then you will have the 60-minute for the title matches. There are very rare times that you've ever seen a no limit on a New Japan match, but they are normally saved for some of like the best matches. So for example, when we saw Kenny and Okada's 2 out of 3 falls match, that obviously went over 70 minutes. Things like Wrestle Kingdom, sometimes they'll be less likely to have time limits. But it wasn't until I saw them that I realised how important it was, because we got to see the wrestlers sort of a sense of urgency, especially, for example, with the Young Lion matches. And I know when I started watching it, at first I was like, why are there so many time limit draws? Why are the matches so short if this is going to keep happening? But for me, I almost feel like New Japan wants these wrestlers to bring their 100% from the get-go. You don't want to see them warming up. Like, leave the warm-ups for before the show. Wrestlers need to go into the match with all their heart, not sort of waiting to warm up. And that's what fans love to see. Action from the very beginning, and almost like, oh, this isn't just another match. We need to get this finished in this time limit. And I always think that when New Japan do go over with matches, so if they maybe go with a 30-minute mark, which something in WWE I was like, so is it time to go home yet? But with New Japan is set and sort of reserved for some of the best matches. They don't just have random long matches. There will be a story to it, there will be cohesion, and they will literally feel like no time has passed at all. And that is the good thing. And yeah, I think in WWE I never saw time limit draws. But something special about time limit draws in New Japan, like it adds to a story, it adds to a rivalry. And yeah, I just think it's amazing, and more places should do it. I think it's a lot more common in Japanese promotions like DDT and Tokyo Joshi do it as well. But until I started watching New Japan, I didn't realise how important they were. Number 2. Now I might be the only person who thinks this, and I know I've seen some New Japan fans debate this topic before, but number 2 is you can never have enough multi-man tag matches. Now, another thing, a big difference between New Japan and WWE is factions. Yes, you have some in WWE, but in New Japan, factions are basically life. You've got Hontai, Chaos, Los Ingobernables de Japón, Suzuki-gun, and Bullet Club. And these are the core of everything. And they are the core of these multi-man tag matches, which you will see on every single card. Maybe a few tournaments where like the G1 and Best of Super Junior you won't see them. Especially I think during COVID they've done that. But I bloody love a good multi-man tag match. If anyone's not watched New Japan, and I'm a bit weirded if you did and you're watching my videos, so make sure to watch it. But these multi-man tag matches, you will basically, it ranges from maybe the simple 2-on-2 to 5-on-5. And these are the two factions, or for example, Hontai and Chaos together, fighting against each other. I don't only love the fact that these are the matches that create the storylines in New Japan, but I love how it showcases all the wrestlers. So for example, if you have a big show like Wrestle Kingdom or the Dominion show or King of Pro Wrestling, you're not going to have everyone on the roster having big singles matches or matches for titles. This is a great way for fans to see all of their favourite wrestlers. So for example, if you go to a card and Tanahashi isn't in the main event or Jay White isn't in the main event, you can be sure that you're going to see them earlier in the card. And these sometimes are a bit more light-hearted. So you'll see some shenanigans from Yano or Taguchi. You'll get to see LIJ sort of showing their tweener roots. So my favourite comes from Naito consistently abusing the referees and the Young Lions and tormenting his opponents by literally taking the longest time to get into the ring, or even tormenting Hiromu as he recently did. But these matches are sort of a nice way to get into the bigger matches, so something a bit more light-hearted and get you ready for these main events. I mean, some people might complain that there's too many, but I love them, and I think when you love every single wrestler on a roster, these are literally the best ways to make sure you get to see them all. And number 3, now I'm going to be talking about gimmicks. So gimmicks in wrestling, it depends how you look at it. So you've got character gimmicks and match gimmicks. Well, New Japan taught me that for matches, you don't need gimmicks. Like when I was watching other promotions, there'd be tables, ladders and chairs matches. There'll be like no DQ, lumberjack matches, literally pretty much every week in some sort of form. And as soon as I started watching New Japan, although they seem a bit more, well, I guess prominent now, when I first started watching it, I rarely saw any gimmick matches. Yes, there were chairs, but I feel like in New Japan, chairs are just like a regular part of the match anyway. Barely saw any tables. I think since I started watching it, I've seen one ladders match, and that might actually, 2 actually. I saw Kenny versus Elgin, and then the recent GOD versus Dangerous Tekkers match. And for me, that shows that you don't need all of this flash and gimmick to shine. Like, I remember when Jon Moxley had his first G1 and he kept bringing out tables, and I was thinking, Moxley, this is not WWE, you don't need to bring a table into everything. And when they do have these gimmick matches, so I've seen a lumberjack match with Suzuki-gun in it, or when they have like no DQs with, I think it was Satoshi Kojima versus Ospreay, there is meaning behind it. It is exciting for the fans to watch, both in the arena and for us to watch. However, if that gimmick, New Japan's a bit like, no. Character gimmicks are very important in New Japan, and I think unlike like WWE, they very subtly incorporate gimmicks and characters to make us fall in love with the wrestlers even more. Like, you got the funky weapon in Taguchi. Like, he's not always like wearing these funky clothing, but it's something that he had with that gimmick, but now he's grown with it and it's sort of changed. So he's got his funky weapon, which he uses, it's on his tights, but apart from that, he's an amazing wrestler. The Holy Emperor Tai Chi, he comes out with his Emperor gimmick, he's got his amazing music, but apart from that, it's not overtaking who he is as a wrestler. Even guys like Yujiro, who is the Tokyo Pimp, yes, he has his pimp stick coming out, but that isn't who he is as a wrestler. And I think it's these subtle things that make you fall in love with him. So the Switchblade, the Ace, the Holy Emperor, the funky weapon, the Golden Star, the Rainmaker, the gold and silver standard of professional wrestling with Roppongi 3K, but they don't become consumed by their characters, which sometimes can happen, and it almost becomes a joke. Seriously, like Yano and Taguchi could easily be that comedy, but they are also very badass wrestlers. So yeah, that's what I learned from New Japan, that you can have gimmicks, but you don't need to overwhelm fans with them, whether they're in the form of the wrestlers themselves or in the matches that you're providing. Number 4. Now this is probably one of the biggest things, and whenever anyone asks me what is the biggest difference between New Japan and Western wrestling, storytelling and promos. So anyone who watches Western wrestling, they will know you will sometimes start the show with a promo. Then you'll have a match. Then it's another promo. Then it's a match. Then it's promo, match, promo, like it's interchangeable. The first thing that shocked me when I started watching New Japan was it was match, promo. And in terms of the promos for each match individually, you would watch them after the show and on YouTube or on New Japan World. That blew my mind because for me, I thought initially, well, how are you going to tell any stories with this? How am I as a new viewer going to know what's happening during the show if that doesn't happen? They don't need it. They literally don't. Unlike many companies, their stories take place in the ring. They don't need words. They can show who is the bad guy, who's the good guy. They can show which wrestlers individually are feuding and maybe why, just through what they're doing. Yes, it's still professional wrestling, it's still an entertainment business, but at the heart, I always think that New Japan is a sports company. They focus on the wrestling and the storylines are intertwined in it. Still enough for maybe fans who prefer the entertainment side to fall in love with it, but almost giving us something new. And I think there's something just so impactful about having these promos aired after the show, but done straight after the match, because you still get that raw, authentic feeling, but you're not distracted saying, oh, this match is coming on next, but really I want to see what's happening here. And especially when they end the shows with promos, these feel more meaningful because people want their favourites to win the main event so they can hear them speak. How many times have you seen fans leave the building because Naito hasn't got to do his roll call at the end, or Tanahashi's not been able to do his air guitar? Can you imagine that in like Western companies only having time to speak at the end of a show? It's something that I didn't think I'd love, but I do. I love going back the next day and watching the promos. For some people it might not work. Some people who are very much in love with storytelling might not like it, but for me it's the perfect balance. They have the stories, but the core of New Japan is wrestling. The final thing that New Japan has taught me is that there is no language barriers in wrestling. I went into New Japan literally knowing no Japanese. Now I'm starting to learn because I've fallen in love with it. But back then, it wasn't that consistent with English commentary. And so I was listening to Japanese commentary pretty much regularly. Even when the pandemic hit and Kevin Kelly couldn't come out to Japan, I'd be listening to the likes of Milano and maybe Jushin Thunder Liger, whoever was on commentary. I wouldn't understand what the wrestlers were saying in their post-match promos, but I would fall in love with it. I'd feel the passion when Milano saw somebody in the ring do something amazing. I'd see the love and adoration from the fans when Tanahashi was doing his closing speech. I'd feel this passion and love from the wrestlers when they were out there performing. And it sort of ties in with the storytelling. Technically, for you to understand the story, you need to understand the words. I went into New Japan not understanding any of it, but falling in love with it regardless. It was only a few years after I started learning Japanese where words sort of started coming out at me. But I still managed to watch an entire show without understanding it, but knowing what was going in the ring, being invested in the matches. I mean, hell, nowadays, sometimes I don't even listen to the English commentary because I just love the passion coming out of the Japanese team. And that is something special about a company where they can get such two big differences sort of language and push it out of the window and have people fall in love with it anyway. I mean, this year and last year actually, I watched Wrestle Kingdom all in Japanese and it didn't take anything away. And it just made me fall in love with the Japanese culture even more. For me, New Japan has blurred those lines between the East and the West and has made it clear that yes, while there might be differences, wrestling is something that should bring people together. And yeah, I know it seems something like I should know anyway, but New Japan enforced that and has made me fall in love with not just wrestling in Japan, but everything the country has to offer. So that went from, oh yes, very nice mystical, to Sonal's being very soppy. I'm very sorry about that, but I don't know, I've been watching New Japan so much and trying to balance it with my job, and I realised just how important it is to me and what it's done for me over the past few years. So yeah, let me know in the comments, not only what is New Japan to you, but what have you learnt from watching New Japan? Is it stoppy like me? Is it something as silly as knowing what Kaze ni Nare means from Suzuki's theme music? Make sure to let me know in the comments. As always, make sure to like, subscribe and share my video, and follow me on Twitter at wrestling_chat, and I will see you guys next week. Bye!